All right. This is a very quick video made specifically for those persons that would be writing the post UTME examination for various schools or institutions, so to say. Now, yeah, good, you have passed JAM, or you tried, you beat the cutoff of the institution that you chose in JAM, but it doesn't end there. There are examinations that you ought to write, or let me put it like this: there's an exam you ought to write before you begin to gain admission, before you be given admission rather into the higher institution of your choice. Now, this examination, yeah, post UTME they call it. For various schools, it might be you are writing an entrance exam into a school of health or a school of nursing, so to say, or a university or a polytechnic. Regardless, one thing you should put at the back of your mind is that yes, the questions are normal, but the questions are a little bit technical from the JAM examination. Yes, you tried your best, you scored up to 200, you scored 250, you scored 300. Those scores will be useless if you don't do well in your post UTME exam. Now, what's so special about the post UTME exam? Now, some people begin to ask, now, MOSJARO, yes, I have gone for lectures or I have studied very, very hard in JAM examination. Can't I use same knowledge to pass the post UTME exam? Yes, you can, but you have to add an extra knowledge of technicality to what you already know. So the topics don't change, so to say, but you need to look at it in depth from that view so you don't mistake some questions in the exam. And again, the questions are quite reduced, not like that of JAM. That's why you have to be preparing this period based on accuracy and of course and speed. So you begin to ask me, we're going to break it down a little bit. They will not rush. In chemistry, for instance, what should you be looking at as you are preparing for examination? It all depends on the school in particular. What do I mean by that? Now, for example, let's take it from the South. Uniben, for instance, has a way that they set their questions. It's quite different from how Delsu set their questions. It's quite different from how UBTH set their questions. It differs from how Edo State School of Nursing Science set their questions. So it all boils down to how the schools set their questions. So when you are preparing for an exam, all you have to do is you have to be very careful of the kind of questions that they've set over time. So that's what makes you prepare very, very well. Now, there are some important topics. Now, let me take it from the aspect of chemistry first before we begin to attack that of biology. Firstly, of course, you need to be very careful on the calculation aspect of chemistry. So I will soon start my lecture series for the post UTME students, but you have to be very careful of calculations in chemistry. Now, if you're looking at calculations in chemistry, first off, what should you pay attention to? You quickly do your revision on stoichiometry, those ones that you've learned in JAM before, that is, if you still remember them, and you need to do your revisions on them. Aside from that, you need to be fast, very quick. Now, if I'm taking stoichiometry, for instance, there are some areas that I would be looking at specifically the mass-mass relationship aspect of stoichiometry. Now, that aspect is very important when you're preparing for Uniben post UTME. For instance, I'm taking Uniben as a case study. Then, of course, when you're preparing for other schools, other colleges, you have to be very, very careful. So when you're looking at stoichiometry, yes, I know all the topics in stoichiometry. Good. But we need to be focusing on some areas. So after knowing it, after doing your revision, so after JAM, most of you threw your books away, like you will not go back to it again. But you need to do your revision on those things that you already know. Aside from that, then you need to start focusing on the technical aspect. Like I said before, mass relationship, very important. So if we're looking at stoichiometry, we're going to be paying attention to mass relationship. That does not mean that we are not going to look at other aspects of stoichiometry. Then stoichiometry is one. Then we need to look at pH calculation, pH concept, salt hydrolysis. That means we're going to be paying attention to acid, base, and salt, because there are some questions that they've said over time that is asked questions from salt. So give and take from the research done, most of you don't know that majority of the questions do come out from salts when you are looking at general post UTME examination. So salt analysis. So when you're looking at salt, types of salt, hydrolysis of salts, solubility of salt, decomposition of salts. You see, this technical aspect is very important. So the topics didn't change, but what you have to focus on is how technical the exam is, because the questions are very small. For instance, maybe in chemistry, you might be coming across like 10 or 15 questions, depending on the school. Some 7 sets, 5 questions. So these areas are very, very important. So time will not permit me to list everything because my lecture series on my YouTube channel is starting soon. We'll begin to look at these topics step by step. So I advise you to subscribe. Of course, MOSJARO is the name. Then, of course, those of us that are in Benin and environs, of course, you can catch me in your various lecture houses. We'll begin to dish out this point step by step. Now, aside from these few topics that I've listed, of course, organic chemistry is also important. And of course, nuclear chemistry is very necessary again that we need to look at it. So there are some salient topics that we should play with while we are preparing for post UTME. So it's not just using the mindset of jam. Yes, you pass your jam, and remember you spend some time at home this period, or maybe some of you are still reading, but that depth or that energy is not there. Now is the time for you to dust your book and of course start to prepare for the examination. So this is just a very quick alert, I will call it, for you to be mindful that you cannot waste your jam score. You have to be very careful and very technical while you are preparing for an entrance examination. Now, when it comes to biology, that area is very, very important. So some people use biology and say, oh, biology is simple. Yes, chemistry is simple. Of course, everything is simple. It all depends on the approach you are using to prepare for the exam. Now, you cannot go and write, don't tell anybody I told you this, you cannot go and write an entrance examination and you don't pay more attention to ecology, evolution. Look at the questions: ecology, evolution, genetics, variation. Now, all those areas are very technical and you should be very mindful. That does not mean, remember, that doesn't mean that you should forget the knowledge that you have in JAM. So the first thing to do as a very brilliant student, you ought to go back and look at the topics that you've been taught or the topics that you have read or prepared while you're looking at JAM and do your quick revision. Then you now focus on the details, like I said just now: ecology in biology, ecology, evolution, variation, genetics. Then you now look at cell, then classification. You should do your what's it called, revision on your systems and all that. So this video is just to bring your mind to something again, that yes, post UTME and JAM examination are two different exams, but you can pass the JAM and also pass the post UTME if you are very, very wise and sharp. But remember, if you are going for courses like medicine, pharmacy, of course engineering courses, you should know that your aim in your post UTME should be very, very high, very, very important. So MOSJARO will be here on YouTube to give you some detailed explanation of these topics that I've listed out, so that you know how to prepare towards them. And of course, those of us that I do go to your lecture houses, do well to catch me in your lecture house, so you'll be able to follow up on these important areas. Now, it's not just getting past questions. That's why some people get it wrong. Past questions, for example, in Uniben, last year's questions, last 2 years questions are quite different. So if you're playing with past questions, yes, past question is just to bring your mind to something that, yeah, these areas do come out in the exam, or this is the style that a particular school do set their questions. But that does not mean that you should just cram the past question and go into the, you might be surprised and you go to the exam and begin to shout. Very dangerous. So be very, very careful. So past questions is there. Yeah, you should get past questions. I'll be able to get past questions, but there are some salient questions that you should focus on, or salient areas that you should be looking at, that you should consider while you are preparing for the post UTME examination. Now, the time is now for you to start preparing. Of course, sooner than later, the form for different schools start to come out, and that is not the time you start to rush and begin to prepare. No, earlier the better. So you start to look at these important topics. So I'm going to take the topics again in chemistry. For instance, I said you should be paying attention to stoichiometry. You look at all the topics, but stoichiometry, when we're looking at stoichiometry, you need to look at mass-mass relationship, mass-zone relationship, pH concepts, acid-base and salt hydrolysis, and atoms and all that. Then you need to focus on biology too, and look at those of us that are medical student or biological science student. You need to look at ecology, evolution, genetics, variation, classification, then of course cells, together with the other knowledge that you have before. So you can tune into this channel. We'll begin to dish out some little points. My videos are not usually long, straight to the point, so that you're able to get the major information straight to the points, no beating around the bush at all. So do well to share this video to those persons that you think are writing post UTME in various schools. So when we are looking at questions, we look at schools in Uniben, questions from Uniben rather, questions from UBTH entrance examination, questions from Edo State School of Nursing, questions from DELSU, UI questions and all that. So we look at questions from different schools so that we're able to harmonize the parts in which they set their questions. So remember, do well to share the video and do well to subscribe to this channel, so begin to look at all these topics step by step. So I wish you good luck in your preparation. Though we are together, we'll still be looking at some salient points. Do well to subscribe and do well to share the video. Thank you very much for watching.